This is the Neil Placid and the Priceless Foundation Women team, featured speakers, other special guests, and to every woman loved on. Good afternoon. It's an honor to be with you. I am Shelly, as Michelle mentioned, and I've been asked to share my story. And I want to tie it back to our team today. Crown up, sit in a place of honor. And the scripture from Isaiah 52:2 that reads, Rise from the dust, O Jerusalem. Sit in a place of honor. Remove the chains of slavery from your neck, O captive daughter of Zion. We have been receiving such powerful words so far. I am sure you can agree with me. So let me ask you this. How many of you have taken off your crowns and instead of crown up, you have crowned down? And you might be sitting there and wondering, what exactly do I mean? So think about this. Have you ever had a shattered dream? It just didn't go the way you wanted it. Have you ever had someone spoke words to you that broke you? Have you ever had a failure? Have you ever struggled with identity, asking yourself, who am I? Have you ever hoped for, longed for, or dreamed for something and it didn't come to pass? If any of these resonate with you, I want you to type yes in the comments. So I'm going to give you a minute. If any of those shattered dreams, failures, hoping for, longing for, dreaming for something and it didn't happen, it didn't come to pass, have any of those resonating with you this evening? I see you, Esther. I see you, Cindy. I see you, Alicia. I see you, Sephora. Right? I see you, and you are not alone. I have been there too, and this is my story. Like so many couples that are together would hope for after marriage, there was a plan for motherhood and parenthood. So in 2005, my husband and I would conceive, and immediately the planning and the dreaming started. Is it a boy? Is it a girl? What are the things we want to buy, etc.? One of the first gifts I got was a book titled, What to Expect When You Are Expecting. And I would read it from cover to cover. I knew what to expect as each week passed and each trimester. But just at the end of the second trimester and the start of the third, our worlds shift. I would go into early labor and deal with a roller coaster ride over the next 72 hours. From the first doctor proclaiming that our baby had died and I needed to go to the general hospital to pass it out. Those were his words, harsh. In the moment, it was more devastating as it meant our baby had died. But the doctor to see me on arrival at the general hospital would say something different. Upon examination, she declared there's a heartbeat and your baby is alive. Our sorrow turned to joy and faith was on 1,000 because clearly God had to be in the midst of this. Can you imagine that moment? The next 24 hours were quiet, no pain, and everything seemed to have settled. But on the morning of November 7, 2005, 48 hours after this all began, I would again begin to experience the pain of active labor and later deliver our son. I was overjoyed because what better gift could I give my husband on his birthday? But they would later come, having rushed our son to the nursery after birth to say he had died. Those words were like a knife to my heart in the days ahead. And even as we stood for his funeral over his small coffin, I felt like my heart was being ripped out of me. 15 years later is a memory I would never forget. Maybe you have experienced exactly this on your journey to motherhood. Or maybe you can identify with my other experiences because that was only experience number one. I would then face an ectopic pregnancy and had surgery to remove a tube before it ruptured and I died. Or how about having to deal with after that? 2 miscarriages. By now I have heard it all from people. Things like, so when you're making a child for the man, You still grieving that loss? Or how about, like, you can't make a baby or what? Maybe on your journey, you have heard these exact same things. Yes, I know. But more than that, I lost who I was. I took my crown off. I started to see myself not as a queen with a crown on her head, because even though I was dealing with these experiences, it didn't change my identity, what God said about me and how He saw me. His word and promises were still sure, but I wasn't sure that I believed anymore. I could remember for one of the miscarriages before it was confirmed, my mom telling me to pray, and I asked her, pray about what? Because by that point, I couldn't see beyond my situation. I was believing the lies of the enemy. I was even helping him because I was speaking words to myself. I wonder what my husband thought about me. And though he affirmed and loved on me, said we were in this together, he didn't see me any differently. I didn't believe. I had now made this one thing, this one aspect of my life become my identity, an identity of failure, loss, fear, doubt, less than, comparison, and shame. What identity have you given yourself that is not true? Because do you know that our voice can become so loud that we almost hear nothing else? I thought I couldn't even hear God, told myself that He had abandoned me. I couldn't hear my husband's words, and I was clearly also given ear to some wrong voices, because we do that too. I knew I needed some help, but didn't know what kind, because sometimes we don't even have language for what we feel or what we think. And more than that, we tell ourselves that we are the only ones going through what we are experiencing. Thankfully, I was introduced to counseling, and it became my outlet to say what I never said, cry the tears I never allowed myself to shed, but more than that, free myself from what they, quote unquote, taught. I would finally begin to grieve and heal. Because what I didn't know was that I was silently grieving, but not healthily, struggling to figure out, what am I? Am I a mother or not? Did I really have something to grieve? Because though I had birthed a child because of his very short life, society said that didn't qualify. We heard about qualifiers today, right? What about the person who 1 month after his birth that saw me crying one day asked, you still grieving that? So with each experience, I kept bottling it up. No one saw me crying, really knew my thoughts or what I was feeling. If you asked me, I was always good. But deep down, I was dying. I could have allowed my story at that point to end there and stay in the dust. But no, I choose to rise from the dust. We would conceive after this, and even though we would again face infancy loss with a 5 month stillbirth, I was free, no longer captive daughter of Zion. As we went through the end of that pregnancy, I remembered who I was, a queen with a crown on. This loss didn't define me. God was still God, and I wasn't alone, and there was nothing to prove to my husband or society. I am a woman, a wife, and a mother. And maybe you are right now where I was, struggling with your identity, infertility, sorry, miscarriages, and maybe even it's a desire to have a child, questioning your worth, value, and who you are. But I wanted to remind you, you are a queen. So crown up, crown up. Drop that in the comments, crown up. This one aspect of your life doesn't define you or change the plans that God has for you and what He has promised you. One of the biggest lessons I learned was the importance of gratitude and thanksgiving, because it is so easy to lose sight of everything else that's happening in our lives. What's one thing that in the midst of it all you are grateful for? We decided to celebrate our journey and heal together. We remember to give God thanks because He was still faithful, He was still good. And it opened doors for me to share with other women who too were facing my story. My husband and I decided to love each other, live and enjoy life. We started traveling and creating memories. And we have been doing this for the last 10 years. I went back to school and obtained my undergraduate degree and then a master's. And I currently own my own business. All these things after those experiences. Because why? That wasn't the end of who I was. It didn't define me anymore. Today, counseling remains an integral part of my life because I understand that healing is a process and I refuse to go back to the place where I lose myself and my identity or take my crown off. Daily, I crown up. I want to leave, I want to leave with you this. Never allow one thing or aspect of your life to define you because you are so much more than that. Talk to someone because in our grief and hurt, isolation will try to draw you in and will draw you in and away from everybody else. And never lose your voice or your ability to advocate for yourself. I often say people like the sound of change, but not the work of change. It will take work and intentionality to rise out of the dust just like I did. But today I shared my story to tell you it is possible. So, crown up. Ladies, it is time to crown up and let us sit in a place of honor and authority.